You are listening to The Hero's Journey. I'm Dan Zarzana.
And I'm Jeff Garvin.
Let the journey begin.
Before setting his sights on the stars and the wars among them, George Lucas had a personal story to tell in 1973, based on his own experiences growing up in Modesto, California, a small town 100 miles east of San Francisco. American Graffiti is a simple, grounded story of a group of teenagers on the precipice of adulthood. Some of them are ready to cross that threshold, and others cling desperately to their youth.
We went through that.
A little bit.
I dare say some of us are still going through that.
Yeah.
Released on August 11th, 1973, American Graffiti, which was produced on a miserly budget of $777,000.
Yeah, wow.
Earned a box office gross of $115 million, making it one of the most profitable dollars spent per dollar earned films in history.
That statistic
Wild.
Blew my mind.
That's like a student film that becomes a box office darling.
Yeah.
Although not too many student films produced on $750,000, but you get the gist of what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's the ratio that blows your mind. The film stars Ron Howard, who directed Apollo 13, our prior episode, Cindy Williams, Richard Dreyfuss, Paul Le Mat, Mackenzie Phillips, Charles Martin Smith, and Candy Clark, who earned an Academy Award nomination for her performance.
Yep.
The film was also nominated for 4 other Academy Awards: Best Film Editing, Best Original Screenplay, Best Director, and Best Picture. I saw this film in film school, I'm sure. It took me by complete surprise, all those award nominations. I did not remember any of that. I was so surprised.
The little movie that could.
Yeah,
and
man.
So many studios passed on it. Universal only agreed to take it after Francis Ford Coppola came on as producer. Hey, turn on the radio. I want to make a phone call.
The radio? How does that relate to you making a phone call? We still have a radio?
Just do it.
And they're making the roads wider just to fit more traffic. Hey, we got a call. Hi, you're on the radio with Wolfman. What's on your mind, friend?
Hi, Wolfman. This is Dan from The Hero's Journey. I was hoping you could read the dedication I sent to your studio earlier. The one to our listeners?
Oh, listeners, are you a DJ too?
No, it's a podcast.
Well, the Wolfman doesn't know what that is, but if it'll help out a fellow man with a voice, the Wolfman has your back. Hey, listeners of the Hero's Journey podcast, whatever that is, Jeff and Dan want you to know how much they appreciate you and hope you're enjoying the show. Now, gas up your hot rod, tune your radio to the Wolfman, hey, now we're talking, and prepare your traffic light pickup lines. We're cruising the strip with American Graffiti right here on the Wolfman Jack Show. Ow!
Act 1 begins with the ordinary world, or world of common day, where we meet our character in their normal status quo life. In American Graffiti, we follow the stories of 4 friends in the small California town on the last night of summer after high school graduation. This is a really low-concept, slice-of-life movie, and I found that the elements of the journey often recurred or happened in a single line or even a shot with no dialogue, and some were barely present at all, and some came out of order. So I'm looking forward to hearing how you interpreted this, too.
Yeah, and because we're following 4 different people, the journey takes place in a different order. Steve may have already had his ordeal while John is still in the approach to the cave or something. So there's going to be a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, I agree. Whew, I'm feeling better already.
Also, it's 1962, the year this film takes place.
Right. So I'm going to take the journey of the 4 primary protagonists. I would argue that the primary protagonist is Kurt Henderson, played by post-Catch-22 pre-Jaws Richard Dreyfuss, who was actually 26 when he made this film. It was very Beverly Hills 90210 casting. He's smart. He's a scholarship recipient. Everyone expects him to go to college and do great things. but he's not so sure he wants to go. He says he might want to stay in town, go to City College, maybe find the girl he's been looking for his whole life. Then we have Steve Bolander, post-Andy Griffith, pre-Happy Days Ron Howard. He was the class president. He's in a relationship with the head cheerleader, Lori. He is college bound. He's headed to the same college as Kurt, and he's ready to leave this town behind. And then we have John Milner, played by Paul Lamatt, who was 28 when he made this movie. John is the street racing champion of the town. And unlike Kurt or Steve, John has no intentions of leaving town. He's going to stay here and have fun just like always.
Right.
I had the hardest time with John's journey. I think my analysis is weak in places. I look forward to hearing your interpretation.
I like John. He's my favorite character in the film.
Me too. Me too. I love him. He's so decent and kind.
We should mention that he is older than the other kids. These other kids, well, Kurt and Steve have just graduated from high school. Lori and Terry, I get the feeling Terry was a junior. Like, he and Lori are incoming seniors.
Yeah.
And John graduated a few years ago.
Yeah.
But he's still hanging around. He's still that guy who can't let go of high school because those were his best days.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And then finally, we have Terry Fields. This was this actor's first big role, but he went on to do dozens of TV shows. I remember him from The Untouchables. So Terry is also known as Toad, and he is the klutzy, geeky loser of the group, and he's unlucky in love. And he's my favorite.
Excuse me, loser of the group?
Yeah, well, come on.
I identified with Terry the most out of all of these guys.
I don't like the way all of his quote-unquote friends treat him. I thought they were, with the exception of John toward the end of the movie, they're jerks to him. They really give him the shaft. But I think that's how we're supposed to see him, is he's the uncool guy that somehow ended up hanging with the cool kids. And I wasn't a big fan. I thought he was painted in kind of a stereotypical nerd fashion. I don't think we got enough depth from him. His arc is the least plausible to me of all in the film. Everything that happens to him is luck.
Right.
But his introduction is my favorite of all the characters. We meet him as he drives up to Mel's Diner / Burger World and drives his Vespa right into a trash can and then sort of tries to recover. So that is what I saw as the characters' worlds of common day.
All right, that brings us to the second segment of the journey, which is the call to adventure, where the hero is presented with a challenge which renders him unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world. The guys meet up, as you said, at Burger City, Mel's drive-in. I felt that Steve handing Kurt the envelope containing the $2,000 scholarship from the Moose Lodge was almost an opening to Kurt's call to adventure, because now he's faced with a real decision about whether or not to get on a plane in the morning and fly to university rather than maybe stay and do a year of city college, like he said, before he goes to university.
Totally agree.
I had a hard time with Steve as a character. I did not like Steve. He's my least favorite person in the movie. But he and Lori are sitting in their car at Burger City, and Steve tells Lori that he wants to strengthen our relationship by seeing other people while he's away at college. And Lori is visibly hurt, but she plays along with it. I thought Lori handled this scene much better.
I really like her. She's trapped in this 1962 version of femininity, but she finds a way to stand her ground a lot.
Yeah, she's a great character, and I would almost say that she's a fifth main character.
Yes.
But I limited my analysis to the four main guys, because at the end of the film there's a title card mentioning what happens next to the four guys. But I liked Lori a lot. She was a great character too. And Cindy Williams is just cute as a button.
She had a lot of depth. There's a lot going on in her reactions during this call to adventure scene with Steve. So much. You can see her reacting and then covering up and then sort of planning her responses. And then her responses are performative. So you can see that and the hurt beneath. I mean, there's a lot of depth in this one scene. She's fantastic.
Terry, our lovable nerd, Terry the Toad, as they call him, Steve gives Terry the keys to his Chevy Impala and says, you take care of my car while I'm away at school. And now Terry's like the cool guy. He gets to cruise the streets in his new car.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was Terry's call to adventure.
Totally.
Here's this vehicle. Go have a great night.
I also loved that we get to see Steve as a type A. He's got a list of things that Terry needs to do, and the weight of the motor oil and the pressure in the tires. He's like, oh boy, this guy loves his car.
And finally, John Milner, who you said in the World of Common Day is the street racing champion of the town.
Yeah.
He learns through a couple of different sources that there's a driver on the streets tonight who wants to challenge him to a race.
Yes. I can't remember another film where the call to adventure is a sound cue that happens off camera. You hear that revving engine and you see John's reaction and Kurt's reaction, and that's the thing that calls him, is that revving engine. And I love that.
And then I said finally John, but no, finally Kurt is in the car with his friends. Now remember, he and John earlier in the parking lot of Burger City were lamenting the lack of feminine companionship in town.
Yeah.
Kurt looks over at this white Thunderbird and sees, as he puts it, a goddess, a vision. And she looks over and appears to mouth, I love you.
Yeah.
And this sets Kurt off on a quest to locate this woman that consumes his entire night.
Quick, hang a right.
What? Why?
Steven, cut over to G Street. I just saw a vision. I saw a goddess. Come on, you gotta catch up to her.
The next stage of the hero's journey is refusal of the call. Confronted with the fear of the unknown, our hero refuses to engage in the adventure. Sometimes this energy is expressed from within the hero, sometimes from without. So Steve hands him the check, and Kurt doesn't want to take it. He tries to get Steve to hold the check. And he tells Steve he's thinking of not going to college. He's going to wait a year, go to city. And his refusal continues throughout the movie, this refusal to accept the adventure of going to school. And then his adventure with the girl is all the refusals from without. Kurt wants to go after that blonde girl in the white T-Bird, but Steve refuses to follow. And then throughout the movie, when Kurt spots the girl, everyone refuses to help him find her. Like, everyone's like, no, we got our own thing going on. So really, Kurt spends the whole movie bouncing from refusal within to refusal from without and back again.
Yeah, Lori even says, come on, Kurt, we can't be spending half the night chasing girls down for you.
Steve, there's some refusal from within in his breakup scene with Lori. He's having trouble spitting out what he's trying to get at. He keeps pretending to be distracted. Right. Oh, where was I? Oh, can I have a French fry? And then there's some refusal from without. It kind of backfires because Lori agrees way too readily and takes off the necklace he gave to her. And she's clearly making a power play, which isn't how he wanted it to go. You get the sense he wanted her to be broken up and I'll wait for you. And she's clearly like, no, you're right. We should see other people. Boom. Cool. Great. I'm going to put my necklace away. So that's the refusal of his energy of wanting to be in control of that relationship.
Yeah, you cannot have your cake and eat it too, Steve.
John Milner, he doesn't want to go after the guy. He doesn't want to go after the racer. He says, if he can't find me, then he's not worth racing. And he seems confident there, but as the movie progresses, we peel back some of the layers and we see the insecurity under the hood.
Oh, good metaphor.
There's another moment when Kurt tells him that they're going to the Hop. John really reacts strongly. He says, Kurt says, oh, we're going to go to the Hop and remember all of the good times, and that he ought to come with them. And he says, you go ahead and remember all the good times you won't be having, because I'm not going off to some fancy college. I'm staying right here and having fun as usual. So we get the feeling that John is feeling abandoned by Kurt and Steve. So his refusal is to participate in the energy of the last night of getting out, celebrating, leaving town. His energy is, I'm staying here. I'm not going away. And then finally we have Terry, who does not refuse the call. He is all about getting in that car. But as regards his desire to show off his car, there's refusal from without. He asks Buddha to go to the drive-in with him, and she refuses. And then John pantses him and embarrasses him. And then he asks Kurt if he wants to cruise. And Kurt says, no, I'm going somewhere else. So no one wants to join Terry on his adventure.
Even on the street, when he first gets out on the street, another car honks at him and says, is that you in that beautiful car? Geez, what a waste of machinery.
Yeah, see, that's what I mean. Everyone's mean to Terry. Like,
I wish I didn't identify with Terry so much.
I don't think other people looking in would identify you as Terry, Dan. You get some baggage there.
I feel like I'm a little half Terry, half Kurt. I think those are the two guys I identify with. All right, supernatural aid, or meeting with the mentor. This is where the hero receives counsel on how to operate in the special world of the adventure. And here's where I start to have some problems, because I think the crossing of the threshold happens before all of the supernatural aid meeting with the mentor scenes.
I'm so glad you got meeting with the mentor here. As I was watching the movie, I'm like, oh, this is so great. Dan is stuck with this difficult divergent part.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I'll start with Kurt because he's the one that I'm most confident about. He has joined Lori and Steve at the freshman hop. We don't have hops. That's not a thing anymore. But it's the school dance for everybody going, what the heck is a hop? And while everybody is dancing in the gymnasium, Kurt is wandering the halls of the school and he tries to open his locker. But either the combination has already been changed or he's forgotten the combination already. And I felt like this was a neat moment of the school, or perhaps the world energy, pushing Kurt away. You've got to move on now.
I did love that moment. Such a subtle rejection of Kurt's attempt to stay in the past.
Then later that night, Kurt, still at the hop, is talking with a teacher, a very problematic teacher,
oh my God,
by the way, Mr. Wolf, appropriately named.
He's a creepy pedophile is what he is.
That's exactly the problem. He and Kurt are talking, and Kurt says, yeah, I'm thinking about not going to college. And Mr. Wolf, who did the same thing that Kurt is planning to do, tells him, don't be stupid, experience life, have some fun. And Kurt sees this guy who earned a scholarship to the university, went, and then stayed a semester and returned to this small town, and here he's been ever since. And now his life is lamenting having to do chaperone duty at the school dance and doing God knows what with the female students in the dark hallways that we see his final shot. It's a very concerning character this guy is.
He's almost an anti-mentor. His life is a warning tale of what will happen to Kurt.
Yeah, that's the second side of the coin of why this is a mentor moment for Kurt.
So I saw two other mentor moments. When Kurt tries to refuse the check, Steve gives him mentorship. He says, you've got to go to college. And that happens in the first 5 minutes of the movie. And then later, John expresses his disappointment that Kurt's not going to go. And here's the character who wants everyone to stay. And he even expresses disappointment, or at least confusion.
Yeah, John, he wants his friends to stay in town and have fun with him on an emotional level. But on a intellectual level, he knows these guys have a shot at something better. And so he wants Steve and Kurt to go to university. While Lori is not one of the main characters in terms of the filmmaker's perspective, I feel like she has a mentor scene at the hop. She's in the bathroom. And her friend Peggy, played by another Apollo 13 alum,
yes,
Kathleen Quinlan, a very young Kathleen Quinlan.
In her first credited feature film role.
Yeah. Tells Lori to get over Steve, and once you're the senior queen next year, all the guys are going to be after you, so, don't carry a candle for Steve. Is that the right term? Carry a candle?
Hold a candle?
Carry a torch?
Carry a torch at both, burning the torch at both ends? Carrying a torch. Yeah, carry a torch.
So whatever
in the wind.
Whatever the phrase is. And I thought that was a little mentor moment.
I completely agree.
And then I don't know if I spaced or if I just decided that there were no other mentor moments. I have no other notes on this. Kurt was the one with all the really juicy mentor moments.
I thought Kurt gave John a little mentorship when John said, don't go to the hop, that's for kids. And Kurt tried to tell him why they were going to remember the good times. And of course, John rejects that too because he doesn't want to remember the good times. He wants to stay in them. I think Kurt's trying to coax him out there. And of course, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that is John's issue throughout the film. He's trying to stay 17. As Steve said to Kurt, you want to be like John? You can't stay 17 forever.
Yeah. John's just the most decent guy in the film. I love him. He's the guy I want to hang out with. The ultimate stage of Act 1, crossing the threshold. The hero must pass a barrier to enter the special world. The crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking on the adventure. I thought the crossing here was contained in a single, simple sequence.
Yep.
Our 4 heroes enter the adventure when they start cruising down the main drag.
Yeah, agreed. They leave the parking lot and enter the streets.
I love this whole conceit of people trying to talk to each other as they're cruising, like literally yelling out the windows of their cars.
That was the scene, though, man. That was what they did. They drove slow.
Yeah.
Just like John says, 5 years ago, it would take you 2 hours and a tank of gas to make a full circuit of the strip.
Yeah, they're burning leaded gasoline with the windows down, huffing those fumes, smoking cigarettes. Ugh.
All right, you cool cats and daddy-os, time to slide your Chevy into a parking spot at the Vogler Drive-In and let your mythical car hops Dan and Jeff bring you a steaming cup of side quests. Yeah.
Dan, it's loud in here with all those diesel engines cruising by outside.
Potato, just idling.
Bucket of fish, bucket of fish, bucket of fish, bucket of fish.
Belching black smoke.
What have you been reading, playing, watching, Dan?
I go through these weird cycles.
Yeah, you do.
Where I will do nothing but read for months at a time.
Huh.
Then my mood shifts, and I find it very difficult to pick up a book.
Huh.
When I get in that state, that's when I start playing a video game.
Okay.
The last month, I dove in really hard to a game that I bought and started a couple of years ago, Assassin's Creed Odyssey from 2018. I adore the Assassin's Creed series. It's one of my favorite franchises. And Odyssey takes place in ancient Greece during the Peloponnesian War.
Wow.
You get a ship. You sail all over the Greek Isles. It looks gorgeous. The gameplay is super fun. I really enjoyed the story. You can choose between one of 2 protagonists. There's a male protagonist, Alexios, or you can play his sister, Cassandra. I chose Cassandra. The ship-to-ship combat is the most fun I've had doing that since Assassin's Creed Black Flag. It's really satisfying. How have you followed your bliss?
I have needed to absorb stories a lot. So I'll just give you the highlights. I watched Oscar-winning film Nomadland, which I loved. I was envious. It's such a simple story. It's beautifully shot. It's about a woman who loses her husband, has to move into her van, and travels the country doing little jobs and trying to survive. And then I watched Knives Out, which I've been meaning to watch.
Such a great movie.
Oh my God.
So good.
It's the best comedy whodunit since Clue, hands down. Everyone's brilliant. I've been reading up a storm. I don't remember the last time I read a book in 4 days. I read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. It's about when you die, there is a library full of books, the infinite choices you could have made. And it's about letting go of regret. And it made me cry at the end, and I loved it. It's 270 pages. It's a fast read. The chapters are a page and a half. You just zoom through it. It's so compelling. Let's finish our cup of joe, and we'll return in just a moment with Act 2.
Act 2 of the hero's journey begins with the road of trials, or as Vogler puts it, tests allies and enemies. Having crossed the threshold, the hero meets allies, makes enemies, and must pass a series of tests to prove their worthiness. I thought the allies and enemies thing was kind of unnecessary in this one. They're all kind of allies to each other. There aren't really a whole lot of enemies except for maybe Bob Falfa to John Milner. There's the... Oh, okay, wait a minute. No. Well, okay, we've got shapeshifters is what we've got.
Yeah, baby.
I was thinking the Faro Car Club guys, they start out as an enemy to Kurt, but then they become allies.
Yeah.
We've got the car thieves that strand Terry and Debbie.
Right.
Yeah, so...
Officer Holstein, who pulls over.
Yep. Holstein
John.
is certainly an enemy to... Yeah, wow, I don't know why I didn't consider any of that. What a lackadaisical
But it came to you in the moment.
On my part here.
That's what's beautiful about this podcast.
Sometimes you discover things.
Yeah, we both take copious notes, and then the microphone gets in front of you, and sometimes everything you've written down falls apart. And sometimes you get inspired. More than once, I've abandoned my notes and gone off script and been grateful that I did. So there you go.
Okay, tests. Let's discover, through discussion, the tests of American Graffiti. We've got John. In his first foray onto the streets, he passes a car full of young ladies and he tries to get one of them to ride with him.
Yep.
That's part of the activity of cruising the streets, it seems. People would swap cars and hang out with other people and leave one car and get into another car and ride around. That was just part of the experience. But he doesn't convince the young lady that he's interested in. However, a girl from the backseat gets out of that car and hops into his car, and it turns out to be a very young 12-year-old Mackenzie Phillips.
How old are you?
Old enough. How old are you?
I'm too old for you.
And he is horrified. Now his reputation's at stake. He's the cool street racer guy. Now he's got a literal child in his car with him.
What's your name?
My name? Mud. If anybody sees you.
And his test, which really continues throughout the night, is to deal with this scenario.
Yeah.
And I really think he does a great job. Part of how he treats Carol is why I like John so much.
Yeah.
A test for Terry. He's challenged to a race at a red light, and he starts to go on the green arrow.
Yeah.
But he's in the straight lane, so he has to stop and back up. And then when his light turns green, his car's still in reverse, so he backs up into the car behind him. What a goofball. But anyway, this is a test for Terry. Can he handle this beautiful machinery that he has been given? And the answer is no, not yet.
Yeah.
No, he cannot handle the machinery. All right, at the hop, Steve wants to dance with Lori. And this is where I really started to hate Steve.
Yeah.
He says, I want to dance, and she says, no, thank you. And he stands over her in a very masculine, aggressive way and says, Lori, I said I want to dance. I was like, whoa, dude.
Yeah.
She said no. And of course, Lori, because she's awesome, says, well, Steven, who's stopping you?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, she's awesome.
I thought Steve was a very unlikable character despite being played by Ron Howard. John and Carol, they're driving around. Carol's being playful with the shaving cream, puts a little on his nose, and he scolds her and says, driving is serious business. I'm not going to get in an accident because you're goofing off. And they're listening to the radio, but the Beach Boys are playing, and he hates the Beach Boys. He hates that beach garbage.
Yeah.
And he says rock and roll's been going downhill since Buddy Holly died. This is more expression of John being uncomfortable with the way the world is evolving. It's moving on without him, and he doesn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
When Officer Holstein pulls John over and gives him a citation, when he hands him the paper, he says, oh, and Milner, happy birthday. I suppose that could have been just a smart aleck remark, but I think it really is Milner's birthday. I think that's what that line reveals. And that even on this night when Milner is being faced with growing up and he doesn't wanna, he is a year older today as of the events of this film.
Interesting.
Another test for Terry. he's on the street still trying to flex his new ride's muscle, and he revs on Bob Falfa, played by a very young Harrison Ford, doing a bizarre accent.
Yeah.
I don't know what the accent was. I couldn't place it, but it was weird. But Falfa accent I guess is what we'll call it.
I ain't nobody, dork.
This is another failure for Terry, thinking that his ride is a little bossier than it really is.
Mm-hmm.
And Falfa really puts his head in the toilet.
Yeah.
But Terry gets a win here when he successfully convinces Debbie to join him in his car for a ride along.
Yeah.
And Debbie ends up being his companion for the rest of the film.
Yeah.
All right. I'm approaching the end of the tests, and I've skipped a lot of stuff, but I've tried to hit the highlights because there's just a lot going on in this movie, even though it's a movie where not a whole lot happens.
Yeah.
Kurt leaves the hop with an old girlfriend who says that she heard he was going away to university, and he says, man, maybe. He's nonchalant about it. And she says, same old Kurt, all the time we were going together, you never knew what you were doing. I saw that moment as a little bit of mentorship, just other people calling Kurt out for his wishy-washiness. More pressure on him to make a decision.
Yeah. Wendy even taunts him a little bit. She tells her friend Bobby his dream is to become a presidential aide and meet President Kennedy. And how's he going to do that if he goes to junior college? And then instead of confronting the issue, he converts it into, hey, let's make out in the back seat. Like he's pulling back into his old life, getting back with his ex. And then it works because he says, oh, I was being silly. I'm glad you're staying. So he's being successful in bringing now bringing the first person back into his world of I should stay. But you can start to see him go, oh, wait a minute. Is this really what I want?
That is kind of where I drew the line at tests, because then I start thinking people are beginning to approach their inmost caves.
I think I probably drew the line a couple scenes later.
Okay. What else do you got for tests?
I would say that the last test is, well, this is part of the prior scene we just talked about. Kurt pisses Bobby off and she kicks him out of the car. And he spots the T-Bird again and chases after it, but fails. It gets away again. A final test for Milner. He takes Carol to the burger joint to buy her a soda and ends up getting spotted by a friend and tries to play it off that he's babysitting. And it doesn't really work. Like the friends who see him are clearly skeptical. But because he's so insistent that he's babysitting, Carol gets pissed off and runs off. And he has to follow her and persuade her to get back in the car. So this is a test of, hey, Carol finally left. Is he gonna let her go? No, he gets pulled back in. I also saw Terry's tests extending a little bit. Actually, two tests. One, at the diner, another guy comes in and hits on Debbie. And Terry tries to be territorial and cool, but the guy threatens him and he immediately backs down. So now he's been humiliated in front of Debbie. That's a fail. And then the final fail is Debbie wants liquor. And he tries to get a guy to buy him liquor at the store, but the guy runs off with his money. And then he tries to get it himself, but he has no ID. And then he has to so he finally gets the liquor. And that's a win. That's a test he succeeds in. So that's where I drew the line at tests. I'm clearly into your approach.
Golly. Yeah, that's everything that you just said is pretty much all approach for each of those characters for me, from my perspective.
Then maybe I'm diving into your ordeal. I guess we'll find out. As I roll into my approach to the inmost cave, the hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of his quest is hidden. Kurt, having lost the T-Bird again, leans on the wrong car and is accosted by members of a local gang called the Pharaohs, who accuse him of scratching the car and force them to take a ride with him.
They kidnap him.
Yeah, they forcefully persuade him. Steve, man,
I would add for Kurt, there's a threat of physical harm here, because the Pharaohs say, maybe we should tie you to the back of the car and drag you.
They also claim they've killed a guy last night. So I took it with a grain of salt. But yeah, clearly it's a very uncomfortable situation. Kurt is out of his depth here.
Yep.
Admittedly, I had trouble with Steve, but here's what I got. So Steve and Lori are slow dancing. And this is a sure sign that he's kind of caught up in this romantic moment. They begin the dance by arguing, but Lori brings up old memories and reminds Steve that she's the one who pursued him. Steve's like me. His memory of how events unfolded is terrible. And his girlfriend's like, nope, this is what happened. And I pursued you. I kissed you. There's an amusing moment where Crute, one of the teachers or the administrators or something, comes up and tries to break him apart. Says, you go do that somewhere else. And then tries to suspend him, but Bolander reminds him, I've already graduated. Go kiss a duck, suck a duck. What does he say?
Kiss a duck. Definitely kiss.
Go kiss a duck. And Lori's amused. This is Steve's defiance maybe is something that attracted her to him. And she jumps into his arms and they spin her around and then they decide to go to the canal. When they're actually at the canal in the car, and I see this as still part of the approach, not quite the ordeal, but maybe it is part of the ordeal. This is my blurry line that we're always talking about. She quotes Kurt to him and says, it doesn't make sense to leave home, to look for home, to give up a life to find a new life, to say goodbye to friends just to find new friends. And Steve replies to Lori by accusing her of having tried to convince Kurt to stay. And then he says, well, it might be true for Kurt, but it's not for him. So John, I saw this approach as one of the coolest. Like, John's journey is so unusual. So what I had is their approach is that he takes Carol on a walk through the junkyard and he's describing all the horrible crashes that have happened in town, the people who've been killed or almost been killed. And he says he's never been beaten in a race, but it seems like there are more and more challengers lately. And he's never crashed, but he's had close calls. It feels like we're getting closer to that inevitable race and the stakes are becoming higher. It's life or death. So I saw that as his approach.
I thought that was a dark moment that he's sharing this information with Carol. It's a representation of how close the two of them have grown over the night. Mm-hmm. And how he is beginning to trust her so that he's opening up to her. He's probably confessing fears.
Yes. So Terry finally gets the liquor and they're at the makeout spot. And he just launches into this total line of about training ponies and owning a Jeep and a gun rack and all this nonsense. He's trying so hard to impress her.
Hunting bears. I bagged 2 bears last summer. What?
And despite this, because Debbie is just super manic pixie dream girl, they start to make out in the car. But the makeout joint is too populated, so Terry starts to take her down to the riverbank. That ends my approach for our 4 heroes.
I felt there were different moments, but I can understand your placement. Next segment is the ordeal, where the hero faces the ultimate test, often risking death to overcome his worst fear, sometimes actually appearing to die. I felt that Terry having to try to score some booze illegally, I thought that was his ordeal. There's gunfire and he has to ask her for money. Here he is having a hard time making his presence on the streets. And then he screws up the booze acquisition and buys a bunch of other stuff. I mean, a comb and 3 Musketeers.
The comb reminded me of Vern in Stand By Me.
And so he blows all of his money on groceries. And then he has to return to Debbie having failed to acquire the booze and ask her for money. I thought that scene was Terry's ordeal. And I think when we talk about the ultimate boon and the road back, maybe that'll help place my frame of mind for this scene.
To me, Terry's ordeal was actually clicked for me pretty clearly. This is meeting with the goddess. And for Terry, getting a girl is the ultimate. Presumably, he and Debbie make love. We don't see it happen, but we cut to they're lying in the field together. So that union, that meeting with the goddess, is a classic part of ordeal. And then the other part that is his ordeal is the car has been his mission And post-coitus, he wakes up, realizes the radio's no longer playing. Steve's car has been stolen. The car was his adventure. He's lost it. This is the death. This is the worst of the worst moments.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So those were the moments I had flagged.
I placed his supposed lovemaking with Debbie as the reward for getting the booze, and then the stolen car being part of the vengeful forces. So I don't know. Maybe we're both right.
I think this is highlighting when you've got a contemporary story that's not a traditional adventure with swords or guns or action. These elements are subtler, and so I think they are more open to interpretation, particularly in a movie that cuts back and forth between multiple stories. And so, you know, that structure we sometimes rely on to find where the midpoint is less clear because different things happen at different points in different characters' stories. So I'm not going to like dig my feet in and beat you in the head, because I think what you just said is valid too.
All right, I'll shift over to Steve and Lori now. You've already placed them at the canal. They're presumably there for some kind of tomfoolery and ballyhoo, but Steve screws it up and he tries to force himself on Lori, and the moment has burnt itself out. She's not having it anymore, and he says something very offensive to her, and she kicks him out of the car and drives away, leaving him stranded at the river.
Yeah, he says, "Don't you want to give me something to remember me by?" and tries to get Lori to have sex with him.
Right.
And she says no. And then he continues to push. He says, "You know it. You know you want it." And then he calls her self-righteous. It's classic gaslighting. Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah. Boo, Steve. Not a fan of Steve. Kurt is still being kidnapped by the Pharaohs. They're out of gas money, and they stop at an arcade mini-golf location. The Pharaohs are there to break open the pinball machines and steal gas money, and the owner comes out, "Hey, you kids, what are you doing?" But Kurt is there, and Kurt knows the owner, because I think the owner and his partner are both members of the Moose Lodge, and they're the ones that awarded Kurt the $2,000 college scholarship. So he uses that relationship to diffuse the situation, and it helps the Pharaohs get away with their stolen gas money, and ingratiates himself with Joe and the Pharaohs.
Interesting choice on his part not to say, "Hey, now that I'm around two other adults, those guys kidnapped me, help me out."
Right.
He just goes, "I'll just distract them and let the Pharaohs do their thing." Interesting choice, Kurt. Are you self-sabotaging at this point? What's this about?
I wondered about that. The second half of that scene is when the one owner takes Kurt to meet with the other guy, and the other guy shakes Kurt's hand about 50 times.
Yeah.
And says, "We made the right choice giving you the scholarship."
Yeah.
Which, again, places more pressure on Kurt. Here's this organization that has placed their hope in Kurt and have recognized him for academic excellence as he is helping a car gang rob them.
Yeah.
And the end of that scene I enjoy, where Joe, the head pharaoh, says, "You might just make a pharaoh yet." Cut to these two owners of the mini golf place saying, "He'll be a great moose," or whatever they say.
Yeah.
And John, his ordeal, I thought, was his first encounter with Bob Falfa. First they're trading barbs as they drive slowly down the street, insulting each other, but kind of in a playful way. It didn't seem like they were really antagonistic. They're just kind of trash talking. And then Bob Falfa says, "Come on, kid, show me what you got." The light turns green and they burn down the block. As the next light turns red, Bob Falfa runs the light. And you see this disappointment and concern, I think, on John's face, that I think that car might actually have what it takes to beat me in a real race.
So you and I are in sync on Steve. We're out of sync on Terry to somewhat. I extended Kurt's a little bit farther.
The vandalization of the police car.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did too.
I
forgot to mention it. I've got it here.
So he is the guy who pulled off this stunt. And you can just see the pharaohs being impressed. They did not expect this nerd to
He's
to
wearing
pull this off.
white pants, for crying out loud.
Yeah. So good. So we're in sync on that.
John, we obviously disagree on.
You're a couple bumps ahead with John. And to be fair, I struggled a lot with John. And the ordeal I'm about to unfold, on the one hand, I think it's totally weak. And on the other hand, I think it's really a beautiful, unusual ordeal. So I'm not going to dig my heels in. I'm just going to tell you what occurred to me after struggling over it for a long time. This car full of girls pulls up and pretends to flirt with him, and then tosses a water balloon through his window. And Carol insists that he chase them down. And they're laughing, but it's serious to her. And at this intersection, they both hop out and cover the girl's car with shaving cream. I think it's shaving cream. And John lets the air out of the tires. And I just thought, he's been trying to get rid of her and hide her the whole night. Doing a prank with a 12-year-old is like the farthest thing from being the macho king of racing. And it was just this sweet little scene right in the middle of his journey. So I just thought that was an interesting place to stick that pin. I have what you identified much later in his journey. So that's just what I had flagged.
Yeah, I think I've got some scenes out of order.
Not surprising in this film.
I think in my head, and I watched this movie like 3 times to prep. I think maybe I was cutting and pasting and moving things around in my analysis, and I just missed this. But I had thought that the race with Falfa, the first one, happens before the water balloon and shaving cream, but maybe it happens after, because I put that as John's reward. Like, this is his final moment of youthful abandon before things get really serious for him. Maybe I wish I could scroll through the film real quick, but...
Well, let's move on to the ultimate boon. Having faced his worst fear, the hero seizes the object of his quest. There's a portion of reward that Vogler calls initiation. Heroes may emerge from their ordeals to be recognized as special and different, part of a select few who have outwitted death. Kurt is accepted into the Pharaohs, and
yep.
In some way, I think this shows him that if he stays in town, that's his future. These are the people who've accepted him. He's going to be Mr. Wolf, the pedophile teacher, or he's going to be a gang member. So that initiation is bittersweet because he's accomplished something for sure, but it's not necessarily the future he planned on. Vogler identifies another element of reward called self-realization. The hero can experience a profound self-realization. They see who they are and how they fit into the scheme of things. They see the way they've been foolish or stubborn. The scales fall from their eyes, and the illusion of their lives is replaced with clarity and truth.
Okay.
So Steve retreats to the place of comfort, Burger City, which is called Mel's Drive-In. I don't understand that renaming. As clearly there's a big sign that says Mel's Drive-In, but whatever.
But it says Burger City on the marquee as well. So I wondered too. I thought, is the drive-in an actual drive-in theater that's behind Burger City, and that's the sign we're seeing? Yeah, I was very confused by all that.
In the late 50s, 60s, a drive-in was a restaurant where you parked your car and they brought you food, not referring to a drive-in theater. So Buddha, the cute car hop at the drive-in, invites Steve over to her house to have fun. And it's clear that she's like hitting on him, like, ooh, you're single now. Yep. I'm going to snatch you up. Mm-hmm. And at first he accepts, but then he refuses. And it's like maybe he doesn't really want to see other people anymore. He's starting to have doubts.
That's good. I don't even have a reward for Steve. I hated Steve so much that I'm like, you know what? This guy doesn't earn a reward. He doesn't deserve a reward. He doesn't deserve one.
And then a little bit later, there's a scene with Kurt, and Steve expresses his doubts. He tells Kurt he's considering staying. He kind of echoes the words that Kurt told him earlier in the summer. And Kurt, in turn, repeats Steve's advice back to him. So now Steve is confronted with the illusion that he's been living about, no, I'm going. So I thought that was as close to a reward as we see. Terry finds the car. That's his reward for surviving this ordeal. John finally discovers a way to get Carol to leave him alone, and he pretends to be in love with her. He's like, I don't think I can hold back anymore. And the thing is, under normal circumstances, it would be creepy, but it's so clear that John is play acting to show Carol that this isn't what she wants.
Yeah.
He persuades her to give him her address, and he drives her home, and he gives her the experience she wants. He gives her a kiss on the cheek, and this is the moment that I thought was telling. He gives her the knob from his gear shift.
Total ripoff of The Mandalorian, by the way.
Yes, exactly. Just like The Mandalorian. So his reward is closure with Carol, ending that part of his adventure. He can have fun in an innocent way. He doesn't have to race to prove the kind of man he is. It's his self-realization.
I like that. That's good.
Her reward is something to remember the night by, his gear shift. Now, the knob from the gear shift on your hot rod, that's the handle, man. That is your joystick in the video game. So I thought it was really symbolic. That's an important thing to him. And he gives it up, and it's almost like him saying, it's not about the race. It's about the experience. It's about the people. It's about finding the gear shift was always inside you.
That's great. That is a lovely conclusion to Act 2.
Whoa, boy! What a second act. I need a stiff one. Friends, slip a stranger at 20 for a pint of Old Harper because it's time for an adult beverage. Oh!
Gotta take that again. That was horrible.
No, we're using it. We're using it.
Oh, man. Let me do a second take.
No, we're using it.
Hey, cool cats.
Welcome.
Do you have a Wolfman for every segment here?
No, I was just going to say, welcome to the Vogler Lounge.
Wolfman Jack was asked, I believe, on a 1976 episode of Dick Clark's show. Dick Clark asked him how he gets his voice like that. And Wolfman Jack said whiskey.
Huh. Maybe I should try that when I'm singing with Flash Pants.
A pint of Old Harper, which apparently in 1962 costs less than $1.
Ooh, that's good stuff, man.
Can you imagine how good that stuff must be?
It's time to have a drink.
What did you get? What did you get?
I looked hard to find a beverage. I found a cocktail called American Graffiti, but it had 2 rums and a slow gin and at least 3 liqueurs. The most complex. It was going to cost like $120 in liquor.
Minimum, yes. I had none of those ingredients.
So then I thought, well, I'm going to find Old Harper. Mm-hmm. It is no longer made, but there is a bourbon called I.W. Harper.
Uh-huh.
But I was unable to find that within a 50-mile radius of my home. I found a beer by Pizza Port called California Honey Blonde. And I thought, the thing takes place in California.
It does.
The can, while it does not sport a hot rod, sports a green, woody hatchback.
Okay.
Which has nothing to do with the movie. But I thought Honey Blonde really described the mystery woman in the white T-bird.
Yes.
So that's what I got. It is very pale yellow, like Budweiser.
Yeah, it's a light lager. What kind of beer is it again?
A honey blonde ale. It has a very thin head. At first, when I poured it, it had a nice head, but it very quickly dissolved. It smells like a lager. It's a little bit malty, and I smell the sweetness of the honey, but this smells like a Miller.
A little crackery, perhaps? A little bready?
I don't know, just a little malty. I'm gonna take a sip. Wow. That is very light and refreshing on a hot day.
Do you taste honey sweetness?
It tastes malty, very light. I don't taste the ale flavor. It tastes very lagery to me. If I had a Budweiser, I would AB it, but very drinkable, easy on the tongue. I don't really taste the sweetness of it. I'm trying to find the ABV. I want to say it's definitely low. Yeah, 4.8. So yeah, I'm gonna enjoy this. I might even have 2.
Glad you're enjoying it.
What do you got, Danny?
I also ended up with a beer from Golden Road Brewing in Los Angeles, California. Passion Wolf Hazy IPA. Now, I am associating Wolf here with Wolfman Jack, not Mr. Wolf, the pedophilic teacher. This is 7% alcohol. Pouring and pouring. It's hazy like yellow grapefruit juice. I definitely smell the IPA-ness of it. That's very hoppy. A hint of fruit. And here's a thing, a characteristic of IPAs that I have locked into my brain, quite unfortunately. But generally, when I smell an IPA, to me, it smells like a brand new urinal puck.
Okay, yeah.
Tasting it, that changed in my mouth. Tasting it, initially, I got a hint of the fruit and a lot of fizzy, but the fruit almost immediately disappeared, and now I'm just faced with the hops of the IPA. I have noticed that my palate for beer has been changing.
How so?
I have been not liking IPAs quite as much as I did a couple of years ago. I didn't used to like IPAs at all, and then you encouraged me to try a few. And I started finding some that I liked, and some of them were probably low IBUs, so I became accustomed to that really aggressive hops flavor. Then I started drinking really hoppy, like Scorpion Bowl from Stone.
That's my favorite.
Other very hoppy IPAs, and I really liked them. I would go to Foreman's and that's all I would drink. But now it's getting to the point where I can maybe have one and I'm done. I don't want something else. And I certainly don't start with an IPA. Of course, you probably shouldn't anyway if you're a drinker of other beers. But I guess, long story short, this is okay. I probably won't get it again. All right, I think it's time to hit the road again. What do you say?
Yes, now that we are completely sober, having consumed and processed our drink, let's get back in our Impala and race toward Act 3.
Act 3 of the hero's journey begins with the road back, where the hero is pursued by vengeful forces he disturbed when he seized the object of his quest. I put the stolen car as the beginning of Terry's road back because it is a consequence of his activities with Debbie, which I thought were the reward, because I thought that the car was the tool. It's his lightsaber for his adventure. The thing that enables him to do the things that he does throughout the film.
You know, I'll buy that he kind of abandons the car to make it with Debbie. So I'll buy that the car being stolen is a consequence. I like that in the road back. My question for you, though, is if the car is just a tool, then when his call to adventure is Steve giving him the keys, what's the adventure that he's being invited on?
Have a great night. That's the basic plot of the whole movie. It's the last night of summer. Go have fun.
Okay, yeah, I like that. I like that for Terry. I like that the booze is the ordeal and his reward is Debbie. I'm going to shift my analysis to yours on Terry. I think that's really great because it is. He leaves the car to make out with Debbie, and that's why the car gets stolen, because that's a consequence. I like that a lot. Yes, I say yes to you.
The rest of the road back for Terry is he and Debbie have to walk back to town, and she's telling him this story of this serial killer who's active in the area, apparently, the goat killer, who leaves a decapitated goat by the bodies that he murders. And then they start hearing these creepy noises, and she gets excited. She's like, ooh, maybe we'll get to see him do his thing. And Terry is terrified. He's like, I don't want that. I don't want to see any of it. I just want to hide in the dark and wait till it's all over. Now, here's where I think I misnoted myself, because now here in the road back, I've got John and Carol encounter Bob Falfa. And, oh, that's what happened. That's why I've got the shaving cream and the water balloon and that stuff in reward, is because I originally had the walk through the junkyard as the ordeal. It's this dark emotional scene for John. I had that as his ordeal because he's talking about death and the risks of street racing and things like that. So that's And I just didn't move all of these notes. And so here I've got Bob Falfa again as part of the road back.
That's where I had him.
I like Carol shouting, "Your car's uglier than I am." That didn't come out right. And then she kind of... Poor Carol. Great. She's such a cutie. Poor
Mackenzie
Carol.
Phillips at age 12. What a performance. She was so great. And, you know, she went on to be big in television, but I just thought, what a killer debut. I mean, absolutely killer. Great casting.
Part of the road back for Kurt. The Pharaohs have dropped him off at Mel's Drive-In / Burger City, and Kurt gets behind the wheel of his own car, and he sees the T-Bird go by, but his car won't start.
Yes.
Again, he cannot pursue this vision, this goddess that he has seen.
But it's like, how is that a consequence of the forces he disturbed? And yet, he disabled someone else's car, so maybe it's like karma.
But again, it's part of the style of this film. It's not everything are these big slam bam moments.
It's life happening.
Yes. A road back element for Steve and Lori. Remember, Steve now is sitting by himself at Burger City / Mel's Drive-In. Mm-hmm. Lori is driving around angry, and Bob Falfa, who suddenly doesn't have his lady companion in the car with him. I don't know if he dropped her off at home or if she bailed on him or what, but they pull up next to each other, and she gets in the car with Bob Falfa. She's moving on. Man. She's trying out, much like Steve is having this experience with Buddha, where Buddha is saying, "Hey, why don't you come over to my place? I hear you're single. Why don't we mess around?" Now Lori is making an effort to move on to somebody else. She gets in the car and she's like, "Don't talk to me and we'll have a great time." And the song on the radio is "Since I Don't Have You" by the Skyliners. I think that was a great choice. Since I don't and it's like that throughout the film. There's the song choice is almost perfectly placed for the moment that's happening on screen.
Guns N' Roses did a cover of that song on their cover album, The Spaghetti Incident, and it's the weirdest choice. Like, why would Guns N' Roses... Oh, can we talk about Harrison Ford and his vocal performance in this film? When he busts into Some Enchanted Evening, Harrison Ford is just, he's just having a blast in this movie.
That is a scene that was cut from the original theatrical release. And suddenly you'll know that she is the one. But added later, because George Lucas can't keep his damned hands off any of his films.
So great.
It's ridiculous. Lori is visibly creeped out, and she slides as far away from him into her door as she can possibly get.
Yeah.
She's like, this is a horrible mistake. Why am I in the car with this guy?
And such an odd role for Harrison Ford to play the unattractive sort of weirdo.
He's kind of like a D-bag.
He's amazing in every movie. And this, he's just repellent. You're just like, ugh, get away.
One final road back moment for Terry. He and Debbie have made their way back to town, and the poor guy cannot hold his liquor and coke. Apparently, he is puking his guts out in some parking lot, and he's drawn an audience. There are people mocking him. Oh, when he's down on all fours like that, he looks like a dog. Wow, that's said by some nice, sweet old grandma-looking lady, and she's mocking poor Terry as he pukes his guts out.
He's just behind a car calling Raoul. It's not pretty.
Now, I got all mixed up there with the road back. I think I hit most of my points. Did you have anything that I missed that you'd like to add?
No, man, I think you nailed. The only thing that I had flagged that you did not is while Steve's alone at the diner, Judy and her friend show up, and they tell Steve that they saw...
they play this awful mind game with him.
Yeah.
They're like, "Hey, do you know where Lori is?" "No, I don't." "Well, we know."
That's definitely vengeful forces stirred up when Steve...
I agree.
Yeah, so that's the only other thing I had. I think we're back in sync now. So that leads us to Resurrection. The hero faces death one more time in a final battle. This time the danger is on the broadest scale of the story. Kurt's resurrection is a relatively quiet one to me. He goes to the radio station to find Wolfman Jack. He's desperate now to find this blonde girl in the white T-bird, and he thinks maybe if he can get like an APB out on the radio, it'll help him find her. So he asks the DJ, who insists he's not Wolfman, and in fact puts a cart in the cart machine and plays a pre-recorded sort of bumper of Wolfman. He asks the DJ to put out a message on the air for the blonde in the T-bird to call him or find him. And the DJ says he'll try. And they have this great exchange about the popsicles melting because the refrigerator is broken. And I took that as a metaphor for, the good times don't last. So you got to seize them while they last. You gotta enjoy this popsicle before it melts.
I don't know if that's intentional by the writers or not, but either way, that is a brilliant analysis. I love that.
And this is a delayed mentor moment for Kurt.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's bittersweet because it's really advice that drives him toward the moment and not toward thinking of the future and going to college. But as Kurt walks out of the studio, we see a shot of the DJ talking live on the air, and we realize, oh, that is the Wolfman.
You said that the scene with Wolfman
Sorry. I forget the most important part of that scene, which is the Wolfman says, I'll try to put it on the air maybe tomorrow. And Kurt says, I don't think I'll be here. So we get that sense that he's changed his mind, that now he's back on the track of going to college. So that's the resurrection of his college life. That's the completion of his journey. And it's sealed when the Wolfman puts out the APB, and there's Kurt sitting in his little Citroen by the payphone, and the phone rings. Richard Dreyfuss's performance is so free. Runs out of the car, he gets on the phone, hello. And the blonde says that she saw him and she noticed him and that maybe she'll see him cruising 3rd Street. And he says, no, I don't think so. So he gets the satisfaction that somebody wanted him, like he says in Act 1.
Yeah.
But he's complete. He's not going to go. He's gotten what he needs. Now he's going to move on. So that, to me, that was Kurt's resurrection. Did you have anything to add to Kurt there?
Well, just that you had said that what the DJ, before he's revealed to actually be Wolfman Jack, says to him drives him toward the moment and not toward the decision. But the DJ, who's pretending not to be Wolfman, says if the Wolfman were here, he would tell you to get your ass in gear. There's a great, big, beautiful world out there. And I think that's contrary to you saying that it drives Kurt toward the moment.
You're right.
But I love the popsicle metaphor. That was great. I just thought, oh, this is some funny little thing that they added so that he's got words to say.
I have my moments, Dan. Terry, while he's trying to hotwire Steve's car, the gang who stole it shows up and starts pushing him around. And he's just kind of taking it, and Debbie is beating them with her purse. The gang is beating him up. This is Terry's big battle. And John shows up just in time, Deus Ex Machina style, and intervenes to save him. He's the Han Solo of the moment.
Oh, yeah. In a movie actually containing Han Solo.
And predating Han Solo. Although we get the sense Terry has somehow earned this intervention from an ally. So Terry survives that brush with death.
With death. These two guys are way bigger than Terry is. I don't know when Charles Martin Smith capped out at his height, but IMDb says he is 5'5".
Yeah.
So he's on the shorter side, and these guys are big dudes.
They got 6 or 7 inches on him for sure. John's final battle is the race against Bob Falfa. Terry flashes the light, and the two drivers speed off. But a few seconds into the race, Bob Falfa's car suffers a blowout, it looks like, and subsequently crashes. And John wins the race. Steve, Lori is in the car with Bob Falfa, and the crash happens, and she survives. And Steve rushes to her side. For once in his life, he's decent, and he's thinking about somebody else other than himself. And this trauma reunites him, and she begs him not to leave her, and he agrees, and they kiss, and they're back together. I saw that as Steve's resurrection, his reunion with Lori. So that's where I put resurrection.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a moment for Terry after the fight, and he's laying there in Debbie's lap like a like a wounded hero. And John says, "Hey man, are you all right?" And Terry says, "I'll die soon and it'll all be over."
Yeah. Yeah. Poor Terry, man.
So the drama with Terry. I loved it. That was so great.
He's milking it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because he's, Debbie's got his head resting on her lap. So he's enjoying it despite the fat lip that he's got.
Yeah.
All right. So that brings us to the end, the final segment of the hero's journey, which is the freedom to live, or as Campbell calls it, return with the elixir. The hero, having won a precious treasure or reward, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. I think the final scene of everybody at the airport to see Kurt off. He has decided to go to college. Steve, however, has decided to stay home. So their roles have reversed. Steve, who was so snippy at Kurt, saying, you're going to give it up after all we've done to get accepted to this college, and now you've got a scholarship, and you just want to, we're finally going to get out of this turkey town, and you want to stay in your cell. Well, it turns out Steve's the one who's going to do that. You said there's another line that somebody has that you put in Freedom to Live. What was that?
John, after the race, is dejected because Falfa was going to beat him, but he crashed.
Yeah.
Which is that, that's part of the rules of the road. If you're racing and your car isn't up to scratch, or if, that's luck is part of the thing. But John is convinced he lost. But Terry pumps him up and says he has the bitch in his car in the valley and he's the greatest. He'll always be number one. And John says, all right, Toad, we'll take them all. This is John maybe coming to the realization that he is worth something and that he doesn't have to doubt himself all the time. And maybe he is going to stay in that town and be king of the road, but he believes in himself a little bit more at the end. And I thought that was part of his elixir, was self-confidence.
Okay, that's good. One thing I did not enjoy about this film was the end title card. As Kurt's plane is taking off, well, first of all, he looks out the window and he sees the white T-Bird driving on the road.
Great idea.
And you wonder, because during the phone call, she says that she knows who he is. And he says, how? How do you know who I am? But she doesn't reveal any of that information. So I wonder if she knows who he is, knows he was going off to college, knows he would be on that plane, and is driving on that road. That's her goodbye to him.
Oh, we never talked about the mystique around her. Like at one point, Bobby says that she's the wife of a shop owner, like a famous
of a jewelry,
of
Hepcat's jewels. And Joe, the head pharaoh, says she's a prostitute.
Yeah, it's like there's all this. She's like an urban legend in the town or something.
Yeah.
And
everybody seems to know who she is except for Kurt.
Yeah, that's a good interpretation of that final moment. It's another mystery. Will we ever find out?
So then getting to the part that I don't like about this movie is the title cards. What happens to each character? Because it just seemed so, the tone was just so off. It's like, okay, you're watching this moment happen and then, oh, John gets killed by a drunk driver and Terry disappears in Vietnam. And you're like, what the crap?
Oh, really?
What? Like, here are these characters that you've been watching, and it's this little, small town night, and suddenly two of them have horrific ends.
I liked the title card. It called to mind Stand By Me. We see this one slice of life when, everyone's teenagers and the moment seems so important, and that's how high school feels at the time. And then you get grown up and what seemed so important, people become insurance agents and die in wars. So I agree it shifted the tone of the movie, but I thought it also honored the fact that the movie was about one night and enjoying the moment because you don't know what your future's going to be. And I also thought each of those futures was totally appropriate to that character. Steve was going to become some ordinary guy. He was the popular guy in high school. He was going to be a car salesman, whatever. Terry ends up clearly being a soldier. You can see him following orders and, falling into a unit. And then, John, he's taking risks on the road all the time. That probably is what happened to that guy. He didn't get wise and old, So I don't know. I like the epilogue.
Huh.
I did have one other moment that you haven't mentioned.
Okay.
Which is for Terry. Back at the diner is, dejected on the curb, finally tells Debbie the truth about everything. That the car wasn't his, that he doesn't have a Jeep or horses, he never killed a bear. And Debbie says, whatever, and she recounts their adventure. And she says she has a really good time and tells him to call her. That's the ultimate victory for Terry.
Yes, it sure is. Yeah. How did I skip that? My God.
And the least believable part of the film that I thought was just... And it's so weird to me that she got nominated for that role. I mean, I thought she was fine, but that character is such a fantasy. I don't buy her for a minute that she stays with him that whole time and is so forgiving. I mean, she clearly just exists as wish fulfillment. It was fun, but everything else in the movie had this verisimilitude, real in the moment. And I thought that was just sort of, it didn't fit with the rest of the character arcs to me.
George Lucas says that Kurt, Terry, and John represent 3 periods of his life. And I think the Terry character and what happens to him throughout the film are what somebody with the life that Terry clearly has and the way he's treated by people at the beginning of the film really wishes their life was like. They want to be the popular guy. They want to have the pretty girl spend the evening with him. Be the guy that stands up in a fist fight against 2 guys that are twice your size.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
Kurt and John are more probably accurate to, George Lucas was a car guy in small town Modesto. He graduated high school in 1962. That was his life as a teenager. And then Kurt was his college persona. Ooh, Jeff, I don't know about you, but I'm out of gas.
Out of gas. Yeah, Jack.
Listeners, thank you for riding around with us for a while. If you are not yet a supporter of the podcast, but are willing and able, please go to patreon.com/heroesjourney. Becoming a supporter grants you benefits like access to bonus audio and video content and the right to vote on the subject of future episodes and the fulfillment of knowing that you are supporting the creative outlet of somebody that you enjoy.
We would like to thank all of our patrons who make the show possible, including our demigod patrons, Scott Sanford, Ricky Garvin, John Peterson Jr., Jeff Scott, Joseph Wilbur, Michelle Calderon, Ami Garvin, and Gabriel Gale.
Special thanks to Dean Ethington for designing our logo, Taylor Jordan for composing the Hero's Journey theme and bumper music, and Jason Dorff for the episode artwork. Links to all their portfolios can be found on the About page of heroesjourneypodcast.com.
American Graffiti is copyright 1973, Universal Pictures.
All right, cool cats. Thanks for listening to Dan and Jeff and the Hero's Journey podcast. Until next time,
journey on.
Let me have a Three Musketeers and a ballpoint pen, one of those combs there, a pint of Old Harper, a couple of flashlight batteries, and some beef jerky.